I actually do relief carving also. I've been doing it for years. I've had customers who've been to the best restaurants in the world, so whatever I could do for them, somebody else has already done something better. So I would take their business card and blow it up 8.5 by 11 and carve it out for them, and they would all have it hanging on the wall. And now every morning my wife gets up and says, "Ah, it's such a relief. He's carving." Okay, well, they get worse, so don't feel bad.
There's no end to his credit.
Some of you guys know that my wife fell and broke her pelvis in St. Petersburg, Russia. So I've been in contact with a nurse there, and she just told me a little story that happened there. A husband and wife were walking down in St. Petersburg, and this husband felt a drop on his nose, and he said, "It's raining." And his wife said, "No, it's snowing." And they started arguing whether it's raining or snowing, and they saw Comet, can't even think of the name. Okay, Commodore Rudolph, the head of the Communist Party there, is walking down the street, and they said, "Tell us, is it raining or is it snowing?" He said, "It's absolutely raining," and he left. And the wife is still complaining, and then the husband said, "Well, Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer."
Oh, God. That's bad.
Don't feel bad, they may not get better.
Okay, you can stand. Okay.
I just recently bought an Alexis from Amazon, and I asked Alexis, I said, "What do women want?" It's been going on for 7 days without stopping. This young fellow just passed his driving test, and he goes to his father and he said, "I'd like to talk to you about using the family car." And the father said, "Well, I'm going to make you a deal." He said, "If you bring your marks up from C to a B, and you read your Bible, and you cut your hair," he said, "then we'll talk about it." So a couple months later, the father said, "Well, I've noticed that," I'm going to take a drink of water. Thanks. I've noticed that you brought your marks up. I saw you studying the Bible. He said, "But you still haven't cut your hair." So the son said, "Well, I have been reading the Bible, and Samson has long hair, Moses has long hair, and there's a report that Jesus had long hair." And the father looks at him and says, "Well, if you read your Bible, you'd find out that they're still walking." Okay, I don't make them up, I steal these ones. Okay, the best thing about being our age, all of you guys here, is that we did stupid stuff before the internet, and there's now no proof. A husband and wife were sitting in their living room, and they were talking about forget what they're talking about.
Senior moment.
Yes, but no, I have them all the time. My wife gives me a card with our apartment number, and I make sure I get back there every day. But I rode up in the elevator with my Italian friend, and he asked me to tell an Italian joke, so I'll put that in right now. This guy was a steel worker, big, tall guy, and he belonged to a lot of different clubs, and finally went to the doctor and had a PET scan and all, and he found out that he had cancer. Came back and told his wife and family that he's going to expire soon. And he went to the local bar and started talking to his friends, and he said, "I'm dying, but I have gonorrhea and syphilis." So the son came in and said, "Dad," he says, "why are you telling people stories like that?" He said, "Do you think I want anybody sleeping with your mother when I leave?" This fellow left work on Friday afternoon and went hunting and fishing with his buddies and went carousing, and he spent his entire weekly pay. Came home Sunday night, and his wife was berating him for a half hour, screaming, carrying on. And finally she said, "How would you feel if you didn't see me for 3 days?" Oh, he said, that would be fine. So Monday went by, Tuesday went by, Wednesday went by, and on Thursday, he could finally see out of the corner of his eye his wife. She beat him up. Sometimes I have to explain these jokes. This woman was working as a nurse, and she came home late one night, and she snuck up the stairs and opened up the bedroom door, and she sees 4 legs under the blanket. And she gets a baseball bat that her husband had at the side of the bed, and she starts beating on the blanket. And then she decides to go down and have a drink, goes into the kitchen, and she sees her husband sitting there having a cup of coffee, reading a magazine. He said, dear, I forgot to tell you, your mother and father came to visit, and I gave them our bedroom. This wife said, he was talking to her husband, and he said, if I died, would you remarry? And he thought about it for a minute. He said, well, if I was in good health, I probably would. He said, if I died, would the woman live in my house? He said, well, it's paid for, so I don't think we would move. He said, would she use my car? Oh, he said, it's brand new. He said, it's got hardly any miles under it. She said, what about, would she use my golf clubs? Oh, he said, no, she's left-handed. Husband and wife were sitting in their living room and they're talking about hypothetical, what would happen if Hollywood came to them and wanted to make a movie of their life? So the husband thought for a minute, he said, well, maybe I'd like to be Dennis Quaid. And he said to his wife, who would you like to be? He said, if Dennis Quaid, I play myself. This couple went to a marriage encounter, and the instructor is giving him information, and finally he said, you know, you have to get to know more about your partner. And he turns to this one guy and he says, do you know your wife's favorite flower? And he looked around, he thought for a minute, and he said, Pillsbury Simple Flower. That's when the fight began. Jake woke up in the morning from a hangover. He was black and blue, his eye was all shut. He wakes up and he turns and he sees on the pillow next to him a rose and a note. Your breakfast is on the table, and I went shopping for your favorite dinner. So he staggers downstairs and he sees his son sitting there, and he said, what happened last night? Oh, he said, Dad, you came home, you were soused, you were so drunk, you fell down on the step, and you broke your nose, and you hit your eye. He said, you got black and blue. He said, well, and then what happened? He said, well, then Mom tried to take you upstairs and undress you, and you started screaming, I'm married, don't touch me. I'm married, don't touch me. Think about it for a while. I'll wait, you can laugh later. This dying husband is laying in a hospital bed, and he finally says to his wife, I have one question that's been bothering me for a long time. We have 7 children, and all 6 of them look alike, and one of them looks different. She said, did they come from a different father? And she's hysterical, crying, and she said, yes. She said, well, who's the father of the 7th one? She said, you. Don't forget, I don't have a script writer. Okay, this happened, it's a true story, happened in Anne's Choice. This elderly woman who wore very thick glasses calls her next door neighbor and says, she said, I need help. I'm trying to put together this jigsaw puzzle, and I can't get started with it. So this neighbor says, well, what is the picture on the box? She said, it's a picture of a rooster. Oh, he said, okay, I'll be over there in a couple minutes. He goes over and he looks at the table and all the pieces, and he said, dear, I want you to sit down, have a cup of tea and relax, and then we'll put all the pieces back into the cornflake box. Okay, well, I knew that there were some former new members here, so before I go on, I just have some advice. In case you have problems getting adjusted, I got a good chiropractor for you. This school teacher is talking about sex education, and she asked the children about sex. Nobody said a word, and finally little Johnny raises his hand and says, I know about it. So she said, okay. And Johnny said, sex is a temptation caused by a sensation. I can't even read my own writing, so we're going to forget that one. My daughter manages a restaurant, and the waiter came over to a customer, and he said, how would you like your steak, sir? And the customer looked at her and he says, just like winning an argument with my wife. He said, it'll be rare. Yesterday I saw a bumper sticker, and it said, I'm a veterinarian, and I can drive like an animal. And then I realized, looking around, there's a lot of proctologists on the road. Okay, I found that being kissed while you're asleep is the utmost form of love, except if you're in prison. Okay, well, some of us neglect to give honor to things, so I want to give a shout out to my fingers, because I can really count on them. Okay, well, now you know what to get me for Christmas, you know, joke book. I just realized that cottage cheese wasn't cheese, and then it occurred to me. I talked to my grandmother, and I asked her about how she met my grandfather, and she said she was 20 years old, and during the Second World War, she was in love with him, and every week would get a letter from him. And I said, well, did you marry him when he came back? She said, no, I married the mailman. This very young, attractive, educated woman has got a very successful job, felt very confident in herself, and all of her friends said that she should get married. And she goes to a psychiatrist and explains all this in detail. And finally he says, well, I know you could be very successful and you'll be very happy in your life, but what happens if you make a mistake? Sometimes things don't go right. Who are you going to blame, yourself? And she said, no. He said, that's why you need a husband. Okay, thanks. You've been a wonderful audience.